Hello and welcome back to the Training Academy. I'm Xiaoling, and in today's episode we're going to be taking a look at weapon modifications. So as you can see, as we come into the operator's loadout screen, we have a bunch of different weapon modifications that we can select. We can choose from different sights, we can choose from different barrels, and we can choose from different grips as well as underbarrel attachments. I'm not going to talk about the weapon skins. Obviously those don't confer any kind of stat bonus, so that's just personal preference as to what kind of look you like with your weapon skin. So starting with sights, we have 4 sights that are available in the game. We have the red dot sight, we have the holographic sight, the reflex sight, and finally the 2x zoom ACOG sight. Now all of these sights come in 2 variations. There's the American variation and the Russian variation. The only operators that have access to the Russian variations are the 4 operators from Spetsnaz. So all of the other operators in the game will be using the American variations of these sights. So before we continue, let's just take a look at some of the comparisons between these sights. First up, we have the American red dot sight, followed by the Russian version, and then a comparison of the two. Next up we have the reflex sight, the Russian variation, and a comparison of the two. Then we have the holographic sight and a comparison of the two. And finally we have the 2x zoom ACOG sight from both sides. So sights are always a personal preference as to what you decide to choose. There's no better sight in my opinion. I've seen a lot of players using a variety of these different sights. Personally though, I use the holographic sight when I am playing any of the non-Russian operators, whereas when I'm using the Russians I will tend to use the reflex sight. Obviously with the ACOG sights, if you do want a 2.5x zoom, you don't have anything to choose from except that one sight on both sides. So moving down to the barrel attachments of the gun, you can see the recoil pattern of the weapon is quite spread when we're not using any of the barrels. If we choose to use the suppressor, you can see between not having a suppressor and not having a barrel attachment at all, or having a suppressor, the recoil pattern is very much the same. In fact, it seems almost if the suppressor is slightly more spread out, very marginally though, than not having an attachment at all. The only time that I would recommend using a suppressor is if you're trying to play very silently or if you're playing a roamer. And the reason I say that is, as a roamer you want to be moving around with as little of a footprint as possible so that you can constantly surprise the enemy when you come up behind them. You know, if you have a gun that's not quiet, you'll give your position away every time you fire a shot. So having the suppressor will enable you to remain more silent and unheard. But keep in mind that with the suppressor, the spread of the weapon is still relatively large compared to the other 2 front attachments. Moving on to the flash hider. Now you can see, if you look at the recoil pattern with the flash hider, and I'm comparing it here with the suppressor, you can see the spread is, I wouldn't say significantly, but it's a degree more than when using the flash hider. The flash hider obviously hides the muzzle flash of the weapon, so even though people can hear the sound, they won't see exactly where it's coming from. Moving on to the compensator, you can see that the recoil pattern is almost exactly the same as the flash hider. The compensator should absolutely reduce the maximum recoil of the weapon more so than the flash hider. But according to the image displayed on the gun here, it almost seems as if the compensator has more of a spread in its recoil pattern. At worst, they're both almost identical. So to me, if these stats are to be believed, it doesn't seem that there's a benefit in taking the compensator over the flash hider. You may as well take the flash hider, because you're not really gaining anything from using the compensator. There has been some discussion on the forums as to whether these patterns are correct, so that's something to keep in mind. I do find it strange if these patterns are not correct, why Ubisoft will put them in here. It is possible that they're not correct, you know, but we only have these images to go by. So based off of these images, I would say the flash hider is a better choice than the compensator. Also, I forgot to mention that when you take the suppressor, you are losing a degree of damage. So for example, in this F2, the damage is going down from 42 to 35. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So for the most part, in my different comparisons with the different weapons that I've looked at, the similarities between these front attachments is pretty much the same for all of the weapons. So you're going to find the same kind of thing where the suppressor and no front attachment have the same kind of recoil, and the flash hider and the compensator also have a very similar recoil. Moving on to grips, there isn't a whole lot of choice here. There's basically one. So either you have no grip, and you can see that the recoil pattern is significantly larger than when having a grip attached. So there's absolutely no reason to not buy the grip. In fact, I would say outside of the scope, this is probably one of the first attachments you should buy for your weapons. And moving to the underbarrel attachment, there's only one choice here as well, which is the laser pointer. It doesn't improve anything except increasing the hipfire accuracy on the gun that it's attached to. So my recommendation to you would be only to use it in terrorist hunt. You really shouldn't use this in PvP. There have been countless times when I'm playing, and the reason I knew someone was coming around the corner, even though they were moving extremely quietly, was the laser sight came out before them, and then I knew they were just around the corner. So I really wouldn't recommend this to use in PvP, and as I said earlier, it only improves the hipfire accuracy of the weapon. In only the worst situations should you be firing from the hip in Rainbow Six Siege. Ideally, when you're firing a weapon, you should be aiming down sights. From what Ubisoft have said in their AMA, they may be adding more weapons attachments in the future. Let's hope so, that we get more variety in what we can choose. And that's pretty much it for the weapons attachments. I hope some of you found this video to be a little bit helpful. If you do have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the section below. Otherwise, I've been Xiaoling, and I'll see you next time.